Good afternoon, everyone. We have breaking news right now. We have just learned that Luke Air Force Base is responding to reports of an active shooter on base. We do have a crew out there live right now. What we can tell you is that the base said that personnel has been directed to shelter in place. They are on lockdown and they are to follow guidance from first responders. We know that law enforcement and emergency personnel are responding.
That's right. And this is a live look outside of Luke Air Force Base right now, located in Glendale in the West Valley. Right now, we are told from people there on base, they had a loud voice come over the speaker on base and tell them there was an active shooter situation and that they were going into lockdown. Again, this does not appear to be any type of training situation. In fact, Luke Air Force Base putting out on their social medias this information that they are responding to an active shooter situation here. They're telling everyone to shelter in place. They've also told us law enforcement is there. Emergency crews are on their way trying to figure out what exactly is going on here. Now, we also have a reporter en route at this time to get the latest information to see. At this point, we don't know if any shots have been fired, if anyone has actively been found with a weapon, if there are any injuries here. Just that Luke Air Force Base in the West Valley has now been placed under lockdown because of this active shooter situation.
And you can see the very front of the entrance. That is where people would go to check in to security. And I can tell you from personal experience, when we have gone live from the Air Force Base, you know, it is a very, very tight security procedure. You go in, you park, and then you go into a building where they will take your ID, they will take a picture of you, and you are given a badge. And that is your kind of green light to enter the base. But again, you can see traffic being a little bit backed up right there. Again, this is a lockdown that's happening at Luke Air Force Base. We have been told that the public is asked to avoid the area. Obviously, safety, top priority for all the airmen, the families, the community that is within that base. Again, lots of questions still remain. Who is this alleged active shooter? How did he get on base in the first place? Does he have a military background? If there is anybody hurt, again, we're still waiting to hear more information, but our David Chasnoff, we know, is there at the scene trying to get some information for us.
Well, you can see some of that backup now building outside of the base as they have gone into a full lockdown here. And Tram mentioned just a second ago how tight that security is. Not only when you enter the base you have to give your ID, they give you the badge, but you're escorted around as well. We both talked about being on base there in the past, and you are escorted around. You know exactly where to go. And those living on base are telling us here that they did hear that big voice over the entire base saying there was an active shooter situation. I also want to read this alert that went out to personnel there on the base on their phones. This is the alert that was sent in all caps. It said, "Real world base lockdown, real world, real world, real world. For Luke Air Force Base, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. All base personnel implement lockdown procedures and immediately take shelter in the nearest building away from the threat area. Real world, real world, real world," in all caps. That is the message that was sent to those there on base in order for them to get to safety, because as you mentioned, this is an active situation. And so we are trying to get the latest information on what's going on. Now, Tram, we see Sky 12 has launched heading into the West Valley to Luke Air Force Base as close as we can get. Really, okay, back on the ground.
Now we see a state trooper obviously hightailing it into the base right now. Again, that was a state trooper. So again, as you just heard Allison read, that is a very, very serious situation that is unfolding as we speak. It seems as though all the traffic around it trying to get in has just come to a standstill. Obviously, this base still on lockdown. We do have someone with us on the phone right now. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, this is Atlas Altman, former Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force. I was at Luke for a good couple of years, and this is a serious situation from what I hear.
Okay, so can you tell us, you know, at your time at Luke, has anything like this ever happened before? And just tell us, you know, how perhaps something like this could happen, knowing how tight security is.
Yeah, security is always a priority for any military installation. And the folks at Luke Air Force Base, they practice what would happen in a situation like this at least a couple times a year. I know the security forces, they're top notch, and they do take everything like this serious. Even if it isn't something serious, they will ensure that they put their priority and their top folks on it. So this is not something that I've seen. I know there have been security incidents at Luke where people have tried to go through the gates. There's been a lot of incidents where security has been tried and they always prevail. So I'm sure this is going to be another one of those incidences where they're going to do really well and tighten up whatever it is that the problem might be.
Atlas, you were in the military, you served, and so as somebody who is ready for combat, who trains in situations where you kind of run into danger when something like this is happening, I mean, tell me at least a little bit about the mindset of those who are on base trying to get to lockdown right now and get to safety. I have to imagine, of course, so many questions are racing through their minds right now.
Yeah, if you're familiar with the history on lockdowns and shooter incidences on military installations, you probably can go back to like the Navy shooting yard in D.C. And there was a lot of those incidences where people were coming onto the base and trying to shoot people that were on a military installation, which was unheard of until about 10, 15 years ago. And now everyone has the requirement to do first-person shooter exercises where they have to figure out what they're going to do if there's a first-person shooter in their vicinity. And the first thing that they're going to do is lock down everything. So if there's a threat, it's going to be exposed and outside.
It is very ironic to, think about an active shooter on a military base. Talk more about that lockdown. Exactly what does it entail? When the base goes on lockdown, what exactly happens?
Yeah, so there's going to be a notification. There's lots of communication that happens throughout the base. There's this thing called a giant voice, which goes out and tells people who may not be able to see their cell phones or be told by people who are very, very close in vicinity. There's this big notification that happens on all the Air Force networks. The military has a system that they pay to communicate with everybody and tell everybody, hey, shut your door, lock your door. If you see something, report it to these people. It's very, very well rehearsed. And like I said, they practice this a couple times a year. So if somebody's trying to do harm, that's probably the worst place that they want to be trying to do harm at,
Well, we are still seeing DPS show up here and get there quickly to Luke Air Force Base. But the good news is, I want to give you this live update right now. This is coming straight from Glendale Police. They are saying we can confirm right now no active shooter has been located. Again, no active shooter has been located. No evidence of any shots being fired. They say they are still actively clearing buildings out of an abundance of caution. Again, this is coming from Glendale PD. This is where Luke Air Force Base is located. And while that may ease some fears for so many, the heightened sense of awareness has to be at top of mind for so many who are still seeing a DPS really roll in that quickly to make sure that everybody is okay.
Atlas, have you had a chance, I'm curious, to talk to, being, a former military member and you were at Luke Air Force Base, have you had a chance to talk to anyone in your circle about what is happening right now?
No, but I did get notifications from multiple people saying that this was going on. This happens in a sense about quarterly, where something that seems bad gets reported and then it turns into nothing. So initial reports, 4 or 5, maybe 6 people have reached out to me on this. That's when I was like, wow, this is actually happening. Mm-hmm. This is something that they are responding to. But yeah, the people in my circles, they're all over the world. And unfortunately, there's people trying to do harm to military people all over the world. And it's one of those things that comes with the job. And yeah, for this one, 5 or 6 people have reached out, to answer your question.
Well, yeah, you have to imagine that they would. And I want to quickly mention also that we are now hearing Arizona leaders sound off on this developing situation that is happening here. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego just releasing on X, he said, quote, "My team is closely monitoring reports of an active shooter at Luke Air Force Base in the West Valley. Thank you to law enforcement and emergency crews for their swift response. Everyone in the area, please remain cautious as we continue to learn more." And thankfully, Tran, we just did learn more from Glendale PD saying at this point, they say they have found no active shooter, but they are going building by building there on the base just to make sure they can clear all the areas and make sure it's safe for everybody who is there on base.
You know, it's really interesting, Atlas, that you say that this has happened before where there have been reports and then it turns out to be nothing. And obviously Glendale police confirming that there is nothing happening, but they're still, going through each building, trying to clear it just as a precaution. But I'm wondering, in your past experience, how does something like this happen where, it ends up being a false report? What has happened in the past to lead to something like this once again?
There's a lot of ways this can happen. Sometimes it's kids. They'll call in and they'll see what they can do just out of curiosity. Sometimes it's people that have something against the military installation. Maybe they lost a contract or they just don't understand the whole process of what it would take whenever they engage this machine that they just engaged with. Unfortunately, people are people. And the bad things that we see in the world are almost noise in some sense to some people. But whenever something like this hits anybody's ears in the military, it is serious. And it's one of those things that we always take serious, and we still take serious, obviously, since I've left Luke.
I mean, this is a base that is in charge of training F-35 pilots. I mean, there is highly public how important this base is in really training our military so that we, have the best trained pilots in the entire world with these top of the line, jets and aircraft. And so when you think about this as a base that trains those F-35 pilots, I mean, I know all of our bases are so important, but Atlas, just walk me through a little bit more about the security that is on there, knowing what kind of aircraft we have, knowing that we're training, that we have the top of the line training for these pilots, but also other countries do send their military and pilots to come to this base to train as well.
Yeah, when we had F-16s and F-35s at Luke Air Force Base, we had a larger contingency of partners, partner nations that would come and train with F-16 specifically. And F-35s, there's still some partnership that happens there, but there's a whole lot of security that goes into any military installation. Luke is just one of those priorities because when you think about the military and you think about what's sensationalized in movies and TV, you think about fighter pilots, and that's where most of our major fighter pilot units get trained for war. So Luke is one of those things that is definitely on the map for security. Their command is Air Education and Training Command. They prioritize their generals to come out and make sure that everything is lockstep and they get to view everything in person. The Luke Air Force Base Security Forces Squadron is responsible for all of the policing at Luke Air Force Base and around the area. And what most people don't realize is the military installation isn't just Luke. Luke has annexes in around the Arizona area that goes down to the border of Mexico for the training that these pilots have to encapsulate. So whenever something like this is reported and it says Luke Air Force Base, that could be some training facility that has millions of acres, or it could be the Luke Air Force Base in general. So like whenever you hear the first report, you have to wait to the second and third. There's a book out there called The Art of War, written by Sun Tzu, and he says that the first report is always wrong in military installations. You usually have to wait for the second or third report to find out what's really going on. But like I said, they're going to take it serious. If it's something serious, it's going to get reported. They're going to lock everybody down, make sure that everybody's secure and safe, and that the military machine, which starts with training there at Luke, can deliver their fighter pilots at the capacity that we've always expected as a nation who wins.
Yeah, Luke has such a huge, powerful reputation. It is the largest fighter wing in the world. A major training facility, obviously, for the F-35s and the F-16s, working with Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Singapore, Denmark, and Belgium. I mean, it really is being on base, a city within a city. I think that's what struck me the most is, you know, how massive it is. It has its own street names in there. I mean, there's a movie theater. There's kind of a club on campus. There's the commissary. There's the store. There's even a Goodwill. There's a campground. It is truly impressive that, you know, it really is its own city. And I'm wondering, in a situation like this, Atlas, is that because of the size and the magnitude of it, if you could provide insight on this, how do they try to locate, you know, an alleged shooter or, you know, somewhat one of the bad guys, right? By going through certain parts of it? Is there some kind of protocol? I mean, how does this work?
Yeah, and Atlas, before you jump in on that, because I think that's such a great question to know how they go through and make sure they can break down any threats that are there. I do just want to let you know we've heard from somebody on base, and they did get a message saying that it is all clear now. So hopefully this will calm everyone down a little bit, but also to Atlas's point about that first message that goes out, you kind of have to wait for the second and third, because that's just letting you know, hey, you're going to see some activity going on because we have to take this seriously. This is what's going on. This is what the reports are. And here's what we're looking for. And right now we're getting those second and third reports saying now that the base is all clear. They're still going through to make sure everyone is okay building by building. But so far they're getting the all clear that there is no active shooter, thankfully, here on base, as Sky 12, it looks like now appears to be over Luke Air Force Base. It was Air Force Base was on its way there, and so they got the all clear. That is the newest update. But Atlas, to Tram's question here, how do you go through and make sure that you can tackle any threat that's there, or just really take these seriously, and then we can give everyone the all clear? What do they do as that is happening?
Yeah, let me just add one more thing. I'm going to answer that question because it is very important, and I think everyone has that question whenever they hear this. But the other thing is there's 500 homes on Luke Air Force Base. That's home to 500 families. So you're 100% right saying it's a city within a city. There are a lot of people that have addresses. There's a post office there as well, and each one of those buildings has a function that you named out, and each one of those buildings gets cleared by a team. When we used to do exercises like this, we would have bad guys that would pretend to be bad guys, and then they would get found in a relatively short amount of time because of the communication that happens on the radio and through the dispatch. And then it's a military installation. They communicate with each other really well. So like I said, if somebody were to do something like that, it's almost a death wish because it is so Loctite with security. So I'm glad to hear that it's all clear. I'm glad to hear that everybody's safe. This is fantastic news. But yeah, going building to building and clearing them out through radios, that's how they do it. And it's tedious, and they will make sure that it's still safe. I guarantee it.
Yeah, that is very encouraging to hear. And I mean, it just goes back to all the training that the folks at Luke Air Force Base do to ensure that they know, not only those on base know what to do in case of an emergency like this, when there is a lockdown, but also know how to handle it.
Yeah, very true. I mean, what we're seeing right now is Sky 12, a little bit hard to make out, but you're getting that aerial view from Luke Air Force Base located in Glendale in the West Valley. And, well, a little bit hard to make out here, but we have seen lines of cars out there. Obviously, they had a lockdown here, so people weren't going to be allowed out and they weren't going to be allowed in. And so we're starting to see people trickle out from the base here where we didn't see any of that activity just about 10 minutes or so ago. The line's still long for people to get on base here. Because security is going to be tight and maybe even tighter after a situation just like this. But some people starting to be released from the base who will go off after this active shooter situation caused for a lockdown on the base. Thankfully, Glendale PD telling us that there was no active shooter found here. And so they're going to be trying to figure out now exactly what prompted this, how this happened. But the good news is Atlas just mentioning here, our military expert here who served himself, is that they go through building by building, making sure everyone's good. And now that base does have the all clear, Tram.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement happening. Atlas, I don't know if you have access to a TV screen and you're seeing what we're seeing, but we still saw that line of traffic. It looks like trying to get in. There is absolutely no movement on that side to the right there, but a lot of cars exiting, which I guess is a good sign because they are allowed to leave. But obviously it almost seems as though there's still somewhat of maybe perhaps a little bit of a lockdown as far as people being allowed in.
Yeah, they normally lock down the base. Unfortunately, I can't see the screen.
Okay.
I'm out at a gun TV, a gun show in Queen Creek right now. Okay. And so whenever I heard about this, of course, my immediate thought was, oh my gosh, I'm supporting, an active shooting event conglomeration at a gun show, and people are going to think, oh my gosh, Second Amendment and all this other stuff. And it's a right that people have, but whenever they have everyone locked down at the base, they lock down the gates, they lock down the buildings, they lock down everything to make sure that if there is a threat, that it's isolated, and then the good guys with guns can go take care of whatever that situation is going to be.
Are military members allowed to take their own guns on base?
In some cases, the military members are allowed to bring guns on base. They are supposed to be locked in their trunks if the base commander allows it. But most military members are pro, Second Amendment. So they're hunters, they're shooters. It's part of the craft. Right. So having a weapon nearby is always something that, especially the people at the Air Force Base and the police, they want to have that. So, yeah, the last rules when I was there were that if you were going to go hunting, you could ask permission from security forces there, and they would allow you to bring on your weapon, but it had to be in the trunk, locked up, ammunition separate. There's rules and stipulations that go along with that.
Which, again, is just so ironic. When we see these situations play out, that, when and if there are reports of an active shooter, that they would go on a base where there are clearly a lot of firearms there.
But it is something, unfortunately, that has precedence and that we have seen before in this country on different bases in different states. And Luke Air Force Base just not taking any chances, locking that whole base down after there were reports of an active shooter. The good news is that they have been given the all clear. Glendale PD saying no active shooter has been located, no evidence of any shots being fired. DPS telling us they got the all clear. Other than that, they're not involved. We did see some of those troopers heading out from the base. They were able to get out while a lot of people are still in line trying to get in.
And that is a good sign, seeing those troopers leave.
Correct. Yeah. And so that gives you some sense of calm. I do want to talk about another big point here, that now that we are in this age where we are seeing situations like this happen, is that Luke Air Force Base putting out the alert on their social media saying, hey, there's reports of an active shooter. We're looking into this. They also said, please do not spread misinformation. And so this is why it is so important to know exactly who to turn to and to know what can be confirmed and what isn't, because to Atlas's point earlier, if you're just joining us now, he's saying those first reports, they're still learning things. It's those second, third, and fourth reports where you're getting more of that confirmed information so that you know exactly what is going on and you can share that. Because if you have people working on the base, working near the base, they're going to wonder what is going on. And now you can tell them, thankfully, they have been given the all clear. But if you're around there and you're noticing that heavy traffic, or they're telling you, hey, what's going on? I'm stuck in the traffic. I can't figure out what's going on at the base. You can tell them this is going to be backed up for a while, because they are going through just making sure 100% they have, everything taken care of here. But the backups have already started because they did lock this base down. Starting to see people, tram trickle out. We know our David Chazanoff was there. We're still seeing some emergency crews kind of pull up here and figure out. And I think the big question is going to be right now throughout the rest of the day, what prompted this situation?
How did it happen? Exactly.
And what was reported to say there could be possibly an active shooter here? Was it maybe a disgruntled person? Or Atlas, our military expert here, just saying sometimes people outside the base, a disgruntled ex-contractor, sometimes even kids, minors. They don't realize that those things that they might be doing that they think are pranks or jokes, which we've seen at schools, these are taken very seriously. So every time a situation happens like this, perhaps an important teaching moment or a conversation starter with your kids to talk about how seriously we have to take these kinds of situations now. Our David Chazanoff is there right now. I know he has been gathering some information. Atlas, before we start to wrap things up here, is there anything else you feel that viewers should know about a situation that happens like this at an Air Force base? Sometimes when we hear these things, to Tram's point here, it can be across the country, but to happen in your own backyard, it's one of those situations you just don't think is going to happen to you, but then it can. Thankfully, this didn't become an active situation, but you're seeing the protocols in place if it did.
Yeah. Let me just give props to the Glendale Police Department. There's 17 other cities that touch the borders of Luke Air Force Base that they coordinate with the security forces, the police element on Luke Air Force Base. And just that you're getting updates from both the police department and the military installation are proof that communication these days, it flies so fast, and the misinformation can also fly fast. So I want to give props to the PDs, the police department, the first responders there, just keeping a good wrap on what is actually truthful so that this doesn't become something that's mass panic, because it could. It really could. And unfortunately, we live in that world where people are getting their information from everybody, and it was just really good to see the police department and Luke Air Force Base work together, and then you guys reporting it as it comes out from them. Really good. I'm really impressed at how this came out, and I'm so glad that it was not something that could have been far worse.
I think it was very telling and so important to hear directly from Luke Air Force Base, putting that out on Facebook, putting it out on social media, because in situations like this, we are going on such little information. So, any confirmation we can get, the fact that they were transparent and very upfront, that there were reports and now it's all clear, I mean, that really, really goes a long way. Atlas, you have been so insightful and great to talk to. We really, really appreciate your time. Former military member here, we again, thank you so very much.
Yeah, spent some time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you, Atlas. All right, yeah, we will talk to you soon. Now let's get to our David Chazanoff, who has been getting those real-time updates there on the ground. David, I know you're there just in front of the base, kind of where that long line had been forming, some people getting out. Tell us more about what you can see from where you are and what you're hearing.
Yeah, Allison and Tram, what stands out to me most of all is the traffic jam heading into this Air Force base. I mean, you'd have to imagine there are some concerned loved ones in that line just trying to pick up their loved ones, make sure they're okay as that police cruiser drives on by, of course, off in the distance. You can vaguely see emergency vehicles and some drivers filing out of this Air Force base. Obviously a very concerning situation, but like you said, with those all clear indications, definitely, a better case scenario, of course, not having this be actually the real deal. Like you guys have been saying, we heard from Glendale police. They told us that they can confirm no active shooter has been located here at this Air Force base, and they said there was no evidence of any shots being fired. Still, obviously, a very concerning situation. I mean, you see the amount of drivers here probably trying to file in just to make sure their loved ones are okay. They were still, actively working to clear their buildings out of an abundance of caution. And we've been speaking with any and all, public safety officials, since this news broke at 12 News. We spoke with DPS. They told us that it's all clear. Other than that, they are not involved. But really, that base employee text, you guys read it over the air, very alarming. Just the words, saying real world base lockdown, real world, especially in all caps too. Really shows the urgency of the situation. Thankfully, the all clear has been given, but again, you just see the amount of drivers here. It's, certainly fascinating to see, and you certainly hope everything's okay.
All right, David, we thank you so much for your reporting out there. I know you're going to stay out there for our next newscast coming up at 1 o'clock. Thanks so much.
Well, you have been watching this special as we were hearing reports of an active shooter on Luke Air Force Base located in the West Valley in Glendale. The very latest is that there was no active shooter they found. They also didn't hear reports of shots fired, but they're going to look into how exactly the situation got started because it did prompt a full lockdown of Luke Air Force Base. Again, they've been given the all clear. So we will continue to follow this for you. You want to make sure to continue to follow us online and right here on 12 News and 12 Plus for the very latest information.
And we'll see you back here in about an hour and 15 minutes for 12 News at 1 with another update coming up at 12:22.